All right, I think it's time to start our panel, Lunch and Learn panel. Oracle ACE directors here. A couple rules. There is a live stream going on, so pretty much people are watching us eat right now, which I'm sure is terribly entertaining. If you have a question, raise your hand. Doug will come running around and hopefully give you the mic so that everybody can hear it, including those on the live stream. We'll all be sure to repeat the question as well. Turn this guy off. If you want to ask a question via Twitter, for those on the live stream, use the hashtag ORCLApex and/or Kscope. I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on both, so if you could use Oracle Apex, I think that's a little bit better. Won't bump into the other sessions and whatnot. I'll read the questions on Twitter here to the panel, and they'll address them as well. So Twitter, raise your hand, Doug will come around. I'm going to introduce the panel here in just a second, and we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Scott Spendolini, Executive Director of Encatech, formerly of Somnivo, of course. Obviously, do Apex, lots of Apex for years, and I'll let the panel introduce the rest of themselves. Dimitri?
My name is Dimitri Hilis. I'm from Apex Evangelists, and I started with Apex in 2004.
My name's John Scott, and together with Dimitri Galis, I'm with Apex Evangelists. Live in England, spend a lot of time in the US, love coming to conferences like this, love Apex.
My name is Martin D'Souza. I'm the CTO at Clarifit. I've been developing with Apex for way back when it was called HTMLDB. And like John, I like coming to these conferences.
Anton Nielsen, I'm with C2 Consulting. And we actually do stuff that's not just Apex. So sometimes I'm able to contrast a little bit against, ADF or some other things. But Apex is certainly really high on our list of tools to use.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, so we'll open up the floor. This is just a wide open panel discussion. Questions are welcome. In fact, it's going to be a pretty boring lunch without it. So who's going to be first?
Not all at once
right
right
now. Thank you for
now.
attending our...
We got someone. Hold on. We got someone.
Okay, being on an old version of Apex, is there any gotchas or things to consider when upgrading to 4.1 and eventually 4.2?
Are you repeating the question?
I can repeat it, sure. The question was, and I imagine you're on 3-something? Yeah, 3. Being on an older version of Apex, what are the gotchas? What are the issues when upgrading to 4.1 and 4.2? I could start, in my experience, the more custom JavaScript and the more jQuery hand-coded stuff you have, the more risk you introduced. So it could still work in 4.0 and 4.1 and 4.2, but if you've got different versions of jQuery, obviously 4.0 and 4.1 and 4.2 have specific versions integrated with them. So there could be issues with your plugin not working with the version that ships with Apex. I think it's really more of a retrofit exercise because you might have 100 or 200 or 500 lines of JavaScript. With 4.0 and greater, you could easily rewrite those as dynamic actions, which are much more manageable, much more compatible, work across all browsers. It's kind of like the forms upgrade question I said on a panel yesterday. Do you have to upgrade all your JavaScript, especially if it all works? No, you don't have to, but you may want to start considering that, especially for new development as well. But those are really the only areas that I've seen with any impact is the custom jQuery, custom JavaScript from 3.2 to 4.
What I saw when I was doing those upgrades of those applications, there was mainly 4 areas, like Scott said, is the JavaScript. But next to that, I also saw like if you're using specific templates and themes, they might not be compatible, or you might need to tweak them a bit when you upgrade Apex. Normally, everything should work, but you always have to test. The other part, I see the Apex development team is spending a lot of time in making Apex secure. So if you build things in a certain way that are not necessarily secure, you have an issue as well. So Apex will block that. So you will have an issue there. Running the advisor will help you a lot to see all those issues. With the upgrades, like the last part is every new Apex version has so many new features. For example, hidden items are now hidden and protected as in a security area. The charts, they got upgraded from an AnyChart version 3.3 to 5, and it will be 6 in Apex 4.2. So there might be differences with the components that he used as well. So you might want to test that as well.
Guys, we have a comment
And
back here.
I can mention just a few very specific ones in that regard. Just the hidden and protected items. Also, the read-only, conditionally read-only, and if you make an item display-only, those also add checksums now. And so any place that you'd had JavaScript that might have set one of those things that was those ways, you'll fail with a checksum error. If you use the utility graybox, it will fail with 4.1.1. If you use the Apex Mail API from within a workspace that you haven't set up the workspace ID. If you're coming on, I think on 3.2 when you did, if you use that Apex Mail, you didn't have to do anything. You could just use it in jobs and so forth. But now you either have to do it through a page or you have to set up your security group ID. So that's a few specific ones.
Just a comment about upgrading in general. Check with Metalink or my Oracle support after you upgrade. We ran into an authentication problem, which was fixed by a patch. So just general practice after you upgrade, check Metalink.
Yeah, and related to that, there's also the documentation, the release notes. Sometimes the Apex development team makes a change in how things behave. So it's always good to read the documentation as well.
And one more comment here. The upgrade utility, so Apex 4 and greater has an upgrade utility which looks at your application, and when they do the migration from 3.2 to 4, a lot of the new features such as the charts and the new number formats and things like that don't automatically get upgraded. So you'll go from 3.2 to 4 or 4.1, your charts will still be the older version of the charts. So you do have to run that upgrade utility, and it'll point out the ones that are still older charts. It's very easy to upgrade those. I've had no issues doing the upgrade on any of those. One other thing to keep in mind, though, is there may be some stuff that you're fine with the old way, and that upgrade utility is going to say this needs to be upgraded. Needs is sort of a relative word. You don't have to do everything it recommends that you do. It's just identifying things that have been improved in 4.0 or 4.1 since 3.2, and it does recommend, and I recommend most things do get upgraded, but I'm sure there's a couple exceptions.
Just to add to that note, a couple of things is, especially in 3.2, there's things you did that you may not have supposed to have done to the application and little hacks and tweaks. What we found is when you do those, you should be conscious of what you're doing and put them on a corporate wiki page, put them somewhere where everyone knows about them. And what happens is when you can go to upgrade time, usually what we'll do is go through that list. And it's almost like a laundry list of, hey, we've done something we probably shouldn't have. Will this work in the new version? So that's the first thing that helps out, just making sure you have a place in your corporation where you can keep note of that. And the other thing too is the overall upgrade process. Sometimes people upgrade their dev to, let's say, from 3.2 to 4.1, and only then do they realize that, wait a second, we can't actually push our applications from dev to test to prod because our development system now is on 4.1 where everything else is 3.2. And if you have a simple setup of dev, test, prod, upgrade your test because that means you can move from dev to tests, let the testers work on it, and then also move from dev to production if you do need to fix a production-related issue. It's the simplest way.
All right, good answers.
Yesterday evening during the open mic night, we saw a nice mobile app for the iPad where from the Apex website they actually could get the photo camera on the iPad to work. So how difficult are things like that if you want to have a mobile app but it also uses the actual mobile things on the mobile device like a GPS or a camera? Can you do that now with Apex? Well, apparently you can, and is it also going to evolve?
Yeah, I'll take that one. With mobile development, you've generally got one of two different options. You can either go the native application route. If you go the native application route, then You've got full access to the cameras, to the phone's camera, GPS, all of that kind of thing. Or you can go with a mobile website. So basically your mobile application is just accessing your Apex application directly, and you've themed it using jQuery UI, that type of thing. In that scenario, you don't have access directly to the phone's camera, all of that kind of thing. What we've generally done in the past, we've got a couple of applications that we've had built as native iPhone applications, and we're transmitting information to the back-end Apex database via web services, and we're actually using the Apex listener to define those web services so we can pass the upload pictures, GPS coordinates, that type of thing. Another area that we've used in the past, there are some libraries and frameworks that you can actually use for mobile development. One excellent one is called PhoneGap. If you look that up, that's a cross-platform iPhone, BlackBerry, all the different kind of standard phones you can get these days that actually essentially create a native application that is a wrapper around an HTML application. And with that, you get JavaScript access to the phone's camera, the GPS, all of those kind of things. If anybody's interested in my session on Wednesday, quick plug on WebSockets, you're going to see, I apologize, you're going to see some application of PhoneGap mobile combined with an Apex application. So,
PhoneGap's my choice as well. That's what we use.
Yeah, and sometimes you can use HTML5 features as well. But if you don't want to use PhoneGap and you have, for example, Android, you can include Java or Flash things, and they are able to access your camera as well. But that always you need to allow it. The user needs to allow it, so it's not automatic.
And something I should have just added there, the PhoneGap library that you use, it's essentially JavaScript that you're coding. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, it's a very familiar paradigm to develop with.
Back here, guys.
Just a quick comment. iOS 6 for the Apple devices is going to allow web access to the camera, which is going to make a lot of our lives easier. They just announced that 2 weeks ago at the WWDC. And I think there's a couple other things that they're adding through Safari that's going to allow us to do more things. Because I know I've had a lot of people ask, I have this app and I need to upload the picture. Can I do it? Well, you have to wrap it inside of a native app to do it, to access the camera and the OS and whatnot. But iOS 6, you just click on it and you're able to access your film roll or the camera directly. So that will help.
Very cool.
Putting it on a Java server, so we use Glassfish, and then have Apache in front of it as a reverse proxy. In between, you have three choices: mod proxy, mod JK, and mod AGP. And if you use a WebLogic, it's mod WL something. And I don't really have the preference. We use mod proxy on ours.
And I prefer AJP.
No, so
just a quick one. I recently set up an environment for a customer about 6 weeks ago, and the way we configured that, we set up Glassfish with the Apex listener, and their internal development team access directly via that. We also set up an OHS proxy in front of that. All external people come via that, and the reason we did that was there was various security reasons behind that. On the proxy server, we actually add some extra HTTP headers to all incoming requests, so the Apex application kind of knows if it's being accessed internally or externally and does different things. So.
Yeah, and that's really the reason you've got a lot of opportunity to do security things, but you also get all the benefits of caching, and you're able to offload, images and everything that's essentially static. You can offload to that web listener, rewrite rules, all kinds of third-party options into Apache, other ones as well. But there's a denial of service plugin for Apache that's available. There's lots of options there, and those are all the reasons that. Yeah.
The other thing I would add, I think there are very few people who are experts in the Oracle HTTP server and experts in Glassfish and experts in WebLogic server. They're kind of huge topics in their own right. So the way you do things like virtual hosting in Apache is different to how you do it in Glassfish. So it's what you're kind of familiar with, what your tool set is. I've used Apache in the OHS for years. It took me a while to get up to speed with Glassfish. Now I'm kind of sold on Glassfish, and the Apex Listener is definitely the way forward for Apex applications, I think.
Just to add to that, you might also want to, if it's just intranet, Apex Listener might be fine, but when you start going outside, as John mentioned, the skill set, if you have your IT team doesn't even know about Apex Listener, they'll probably just really push you to use an Apache server as a front end for that.
All right, next question all the way back. And again, the folks who are online, you can tweet your questions, use the hashtag #ORCLApex.
Hi, thank you. I'm new in Apex. I have a question. I have an application allow user to upload a file, but we only allow them to upload the JPEG and the Adobe PDF file. And our security people, basically, they have a PHP file, and he appended that GPG to the end. When I loaded, Apex treated it as an image file. And he thought it was a security risk. And how Apex tested is a test file, not an image file. This is my question.
I'll take the first part of the question. The first part of the question is, how do you restrict certain types of files from being uploaded? If you're using the standard file browse upload, there's pretty much no way of doing that until it actually comes onto the server, and then you can inspect it. With HTML5, I had a demo of that yesterday, and I'll be posting it on the blog, talkapex.com, pretty soon, of how you can look at that file before you even send it over to Apex. So in HTML5, the new JavaScript that comes along with it, you get 3 different attributes of the file amongst many, but they're really of concern to you. One is the file name, the file size, and the file media type. And from there, you can say, well, the file's too big, because you might not want really large files, or you might also say that the file type is not what you want. I think you said Adobe Illustrator and PDF, so you can restrict it based on that. And that's the way to do it right now, is to start using HTML5 without having to send it to the server first.
I think the challenge there, though, is that that's all, if you're really concerned from a security perspective, not just a casual user accidentally doing it, but somebody that's determined. You can't rely on something on the browser. It doesn't matter what's on the browser. If they're determined, they can turn it off. They can bypass it. They can just directly telnet the file up. There are hooks into the Apex Listener. I'm betting you could write a hook, and you can, yeah. Right, that you could write a hook into it before, as it enters the Apex Listener, if you never want it to make it to the database, to inspect it there.
Actually, in the version 2 of the Apex Listener, there's a built-in virus scanner, or the possibility to add that possibility, like add a path for a virus scanner. So if you're really, I don't know what your business you're in. Oftentimes, keeping the casual user from doing something that you don't want is all you need. But if it's really truly that you don't want this to happen, I would look at the Apex Listener as a good place to do it. On the other hand, from a security perspective, this file ends up as a blob in your database. If you inspect it the moment after it ends up in your database and you then get rid of it, there really is not a security vulnerability there. The file's never going to end up, accessible to somebody. It's not truly an issue, but if you have a corporate policy that you have to abide by, that it never makes into your database, these are the things to look at.
Yeah, and you could even build an app around that. So as soon as it hits your database, it's a blob. It doesn't get exposed to anybody else. It goes in a quarantine table. Your security team downloads it on an isolated PC, tests it, make sure that it's okay. I had one client, and they were concerned about this for text files. I had a real simple solution, 2CAR. Right, so if there's anything in there that's going to execute a virus, that blob is now a character, and it was just a text file, so it didn't hurt the content of the data, but it would render anything in there useless, and they still didn't go for it. Like, well, what if it un2CARs? Like, it's not going to un2CAR. It'll be useless. But there really is no unfortunate bulletproof answer to that, because I could rename a PDF.jpg, I could rename a JPEG.doc, and mess with the MIME types and stuff, and try to trick it.
Within an Apex, when I'm calling a page URL, I can secure that page using the checksum and the prepare URL, the utility of the Apex. However, when I am calling the external URL, how can I secure the URL? I mean, I want to prevent the users not to tamper the parameters that is being passed from the Apex to the external URL. Is there any way to secure such external URLs?
Okay, so question is, you understand the checksums on internal items in Apex, but if there's an external item you want to prevent tampering to the external URL, I can't think of any way to stop people, because I can just copy that URL in a brand new browser. And
you're talking about an application that's not Apex? I don't understand the question.
It's not Apex application.
Right.
It's a different application.
Yeah.
Is that Apex application connected to your same database?
Yes.
What we've done in the past is, so the real question is, you've got an application, let's just say in .NET, and you want to send a URL with some parameter over to Apex.
Oh, from .NET to
other way around.
From .NET.
From Apex to, let's say, .NET.
Okay.
Application.
It's the same thing. What you can do is, in Apex, you can have, however you want to do it, but I'm going to describe the really simple form is, have a simple function that hashes that internally, that you have you salt it, you secure it, etc. Because they're all connected to the same database, you send that over as a parameter, and then the .NET application can unhash it or just make sure that the hash is valid. So you essentially let the database be the common key holder in that situation. And it's a pretty simple solution. You can probably go a lot more complex,
the other option is a back channel between the two systems, where that's a perfect, as long as both systems can understand the checksum. That's great. You can have a function in one system to essentially decrypt and a function in the other to encrypt. The other option would be only have the function in one system or the other, let's say in the .NET backend environment, and allow the database to do a back channel call from the database to that system, get the checksum that it needs, and add it to the URL. But essentially, it's the same.
Yeah, so I'm giving away too much for my presentation, but the Apex listener, the version 2, so if you create a resource template now in the Apex listener, so you create a web service in your Apex listener 2.0, you can have OAuth 2.0 on that. So you have the security there.
But at the end of the day, if that target system doesn't have adequate security, all these ideas are going to protect the direct link, but if I go to the target system and start messing with the URL,
right?
It's good to do all those, and those are good answers, but I think you have to also look at the target system, make sure it's secure from URL tampering as well. All right, next question. Come on, someone ask when 4.2 is going to come out.
When will 4.2?
When's 4.2 coming out?
Calendar year 2012.
So I have a requirement to download a file, download some data from an interactive report. And in the data, there's UTF characters. I have a registered brand character in the data. And when I download it, when I download a CSV, I get a text file with unrecognizable characters for that. Any workarounds?
I just went through this where our client had an accent in it. We looked at the NLS parameter for the language parameter, and we actually found out it wasn't set properly. So what I'd recommend to do is make sure your database NLS parameter is set accordingly.
But this is not language, guys. It's a registered trademark character.
But if I remember correctly, and the Apex development team can comment on it, I think there's a new feature in Apex 4.2 about character sets and interactive report, but Joel, do you know that by heart?
Mike?
So I know this is going to sound like an excuse, but the problem is Microsoft's, and I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. So there is a feature at the application level called automatic CSV encoding. And what that says is, based upon your language setting, what is the NLS setting, how is the CSV file going to be encoded when we bring it down, right? So if I'm running in English US, it's going to be encoded in Western European 8-bit. If I'm running in Japanese, it's going to be in Shift-JIS, et cetera, right? In Europe, it's probably MS Win 1252, right? Excel expects the file to be in the localized character set, right? So if I'm in Japan, Windows Excel expects the file to be encoded in Shift-JIS, right? If I double-click on it, right, you can import it, right? In Excel, you can say data import and specify UTF-8, for example, and you would bring the data in. But when you get in these mixed data environments where you have a combination of Spanish and Portuguese and Japanese data, the one common denominator there that can represent all of that's UTF-8. And so for your application, I would turn off automatic CSV encoding, always generate the CSV file in UTF-8, and your end users couldn't double click on it. They'd have to data import it in UTF-8. They'd have to specify the character set. The association of how the CSV is encoded is a function of Microsoft Excel and how they run on Windows.
All right, and for the audience here, a couple quick points. That was Joel Coleman from the Oracle Apex development team. Most of you here know him. I'm sure there's a few people that are new. They support this conference like no other development team. I can count at least 7 of them right now. So they're all in the room. If you have Oracle strategic questions or questions that are best asked to them, I talked to them before. They'd be happy to address those as well. So feel free to just direct them up here, and we'll bounce it back to them.
In a standard database environment, you can put password rules with respect to expiration and reuse. Apparently, Apex ignores the reuse part. Now, I can actually go in and it'll enforce having an X character limit on your password and numbers and letters and so forth and so on, but I can put the same password in after it expires after 90 days, and I was just wondering if that's going to be fixed in 4.2.
It will now.
Not going to believe this, but the problem is Microsoft's. Sorry. I'm not aware of that as a bug. As you will notice, we do have password restrictions employed on the early adopters site, and if there's something that's not functioning properly there, I'll give you my business card and I'll get it filed as a bug. So is it going to be fixed? If it's a bug, we will fix it in 4.2. Yeah, so there is a rule that you can specify in the password rules. You can say, can it be reused? The logic isn't, can you never reuse it, is can you reuse it right now? And that should be prohibited. But again, I'll give you my business card, and if you could just send me an email saying, Joel, I think this is busted, we'll look at it for 4.2.
Anyone else have a 4.2 feature they want implemented?
This isn't a how-to. This is more a question for you guys to get an opportunity to voice suggestions to Oracle. If you had, each one of you, if you had a single vote for an option or a feature that's currently not available or not known to be possibly available in 4.2, if you were to pick one, what would you pick as a recommendation to Oracle?
You guys want me to go first? I got
Sure. You got it.
All right, I've got one right off the top of my head. Pivot charts. And I'm not talking about the pivot query. I'm talking about the ability to, in Excel, how you can pivot the data. What we see is a lot of business users, at the end of the day, we try and provide as much functionality. I know there's a ton of features in Excel, or in interactive reports, but at the end of the day, they want to pivot it and use the same features that they have from Excel. So that'd be by far one of my biggest requests. I think you get a lot of business users on board with Apex once you can do that.
This won't make it into 4.2. I've been asking for this for years, and I'm ignored. One feature I'd like to see is in Apex you can define your own authentication scheme. You get complete control over how users authenticate to your application. I'd like to see that extended to the application builder interface itself, so I can connect it to my Microsoft Active Directory LDAP server, so I don't need to remember yet another password or keep it in sync. So, how many people would like that feature?
We all would.
Fantastic. Not alone.
David Peak says yes.
Pivot charts. How many people want pivot charts?
Yeah, how many people would use the pivots?
I'll have anything for free.
So, yeah, so I can only pick one, but it would be more HTML5, CSS3 related. One example would be, for example, one example would be, now you need to create your validations, like in your page processing, you need to create your validations. They are server-side. You want to have them client-side as well. So if I don't fill in an email, I want to see it immediately. I don't want to hit submit first. So this is, you can do that with HTML5 or with CSS3 or like some JavaScript that's declaratively there. So I want to define once my validation, and it should be client and server side. It's a small thing, but.
That was high on my list too, is the ability to, and to define it once and just be able to, say, yes, I also want this.
Exactly.
Yeah. And obviously there might be some that they can't do if there's, some kind of crazy query
if you have
or something.
a lot of business logic, obviously you can't do it, but like the simple things, like if you want to.
Not null.
Sorry?
Not null.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But also like telephone numbers validation, email validation, like those kind of things.
Shakib, don't we have that in 4.2 coming out, at least the HTML5 objects of the email and phone number types?
There are a number of email different types, yes. That's HTML5 types.
But you want like you want some kind of template that you say it needs to look like this, and I want this text next to it, like.
And the challenge for me in this regard is I want it server side too. I want to declare it once. I want to declare it once and have it checked twice. Client side and server side.
Sure.
That's
you need to have that.
All right, so I'm going to read one from Roel Hartman, who is an ACE director who can't be here for the conference, but he did put one on Twitter, and he stole mine. So I'll go ahead and use his, and I'll have another one. Feature request, enhance supporting objects. Exports include latest DDL automatically. To add to that a little bit, the supporting objects, it's a great feature. I think with a couple more tweaks, it could be a really great feature. Being able to, for instance, when I upload an image, I upload a picture of an X, right, for delete. I don't like that image 3 months later, so I have an artist redo the image, and now it's a nice-looking X. So I re-upload the image to my shared components. It doesn't link that to supporting objects at all. I have to re-add the script to the supporting objects for the same image name. So quite often when we're doing our builds, we're pulling only the images as of 2 or 3 months ago. We're forgetting the new ones. Literally, it's a 3-click process to move them over, but some linkage, some joint in between the supporting objects and the actual generation of the packaged apps would be a welcome feature. And we'll, without putting words in his mouth here, but it looks like he's asking for more DDL generation. So I can say, here's a bunch of tables. These tables are in my schema, and Roll tweet here if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking that you mean something like that. I've got 5 tables, and I've identified the tables in my supporting objects, generate the DDL for those tables automatically. They're in the database, they're right there. That function is built into the tool. Just kind of merge that into the supporting objects. And I came up with a new one, session ID in the URL, make it go away. Cleaner URLs, because we just get, people question it. I know it's fine, I know it's safe, I know that there's functionality behind it, but that's one of the telltale things where people look at that URL and say, what's going on? There's a lot of stuff up there, we don't like it, we feel uneasy. Sure, it's safe, but it's a small little thing that I think could be improved on a little bit. Good question, Mike.
Another question back here.
Actually, it was a comment to the Illustrator and PDF one. Consequently, I've done a lot of work with PDFs and Illustrator files. If you use an ordsys column, you'll be able to pull the properties and the metadata and the MIME types out of that once the blob's in there and do things with it, and you can't trick it. So I can't take an image file and put .pdf at the end of it. OrdSys will see that and say it's a PDF, or it's an Illustrator file, or it's a PostScript file. So use an OrdSys column, and you'll be all set.
You've been tasked. Write an article about that. White paper.
I've actually got one other feature request. I know you asked for one, but you kind of opened the Pandora's box now. I'm going to avoid Shakib's gaze here because this might be in your area. But just by show of hands, how many people would like a GUI interface for designing the layout of your Apex application? So rather than defining the columns and so on, wouldn't it be nice to kind of go in, especially with HTML5 offerings now, just kind of drag regions around, position them, and Oracle does all the hard work for you? Would anyone not like that feature? Okay. Shakib.
Right. Okay. And to clarify Roll's comment, he just tweeted back to me, tables, also views, also packages in that DDL. One more feature request, because John got two, I get two. Better SQL Dev integration. One of the best features that's not done yet is refactor PL SQL. I can go to SQL Dev, I can right-click on the Apex application, I can click refactor, I get a great package, it pulls all the PL SQL out of Apex, creates a package with the spec, everything in it, moving that PL SQL over, and then I have a lot of work to do manually that's not that fun. Have that link with an option. Maybe you want, just show it to me, but I'd also like it to actually go and update the metadata so that all the PL SQL calls are pulled out of the application, moved to a package. Anyone else like that?
Was there a question?
All right, next question.
Question back here somewhere.
You guys are doing really good at making Doug walk across the room.
Question is about the browser support. How long are we going to support IE6? And with Apex 5.0, are we going to say that we will support only IE10 and above, Chrome, Safari, something like that?
Yeah, so browser support for you guys. When's IE6 going to go away?
Shakib, can we put a tax on there like the store?
Yeah, that was awesome. How many people saw that link? There's a company, I think, in Australia?
Yeah.
That when you check out, if you're using IE, they look at your browser and they add like 10 cents a tax because you're using a browser that we have to go build extra stuff.
The government always finds a way to make money off tax, even if it's not $0, David. You know that.
Hello?
There we go. Okay, being new to Apex, our solution requires transparent transition from our Java application running on WebLogic into Apex if we choose that as our reporting solution. So then we can throw all the bells and whistles on our reporting platform. What's the best approach to look at doing that and keeping it secure too?
The best approach is a tough thing to answer, right? But if you have a single sign-on solution, that's a good approach. The challenge with a single sign-on solution, let's pick Oracle Access Manager, SiteMinder, whatever you might have. is that when you transition from one application to the other application, you'll essentially get a new Apex session each time, because the first application doesn't know what session you were in the Apex application. I'm looking at the back row for the ability to allow applications to have session rejoin if the session ID isn't passed in on the URL. It's something that's been talked about for, well, since they took it away. So anybody in the back row want to comment on session rejoin for that particular issue? And then I'll give a couple other options. What's that? Well, I wrote a wrapper to F.
Now, you're not going to believe this, but, sorry. Yeah, with respect to session rejoin, we have looked at it. I remember, I think Scott Spatafor wrote it years ago, and we had to take it away because it was really not secure. And we have looked at this quite carefully, and we're not sure if there's a secure way that we can do it today.
Well, it's not secure if you're in a multi-tenant environment, which is what apex.oracle.com is. But very few folks are running on a multi-tenant environment. Most folks are running their own. And so now I'm arguing.
Yeah, I mean, for the
back to you.
For the person who gives a presentation on hacking Apex, I'm surprised you're suggesting a session rejoin feature.
So that's one thing, but there's a challenge there that you're going to get a new session each time. There are ways around that. You can wrapper. You can write your own function that will, check to see if you already have a session based upon your cookies. You grant access to the underlying Apex table. Read the cookie. Do they have a valid session? Pull the right session ID. Put it into the URL. Do a redirect back. That's one option. There are other options that take a back channel, and I'm not sure about the plugin that you were just talking about, but we actually have a plugin that we have not quite released. I was hoping to have it ready for this show that does exactly that, it exposes an API that will, your calling application would call this API and get a URL, and that URL would, if you already had a valid session, would grant that back into the URL, but it would generate a secure URL that would automatically log you in if you weren't already logged in. Is there another one that you're familiar with, Martin?
I didn't write the plugin. It was submitted as part of the Oracle Apex plugin competition. So I suggest that you check out apexplugin.com, and it's there under the ODTUG competition category. It's the only authentication scheme one.
Okay.
But it wasn't finished yet.
Yeah, I assume ours will be out within the next month or so. And we take a back channel approach where, your two applications, in order for one application to pass you off to another application, there has to be some agreement. And it's like we talked about before with the checksum, they both agree with how they're going to checksum something, or a back channel. We choose the back channel in our case rather than the shared secret. But I don't know if that answers your question well enough. Okay.
Cool. All right, we've got just under half hour left. Plenty of time for more questions. Patrick.
This issue is quite old. We're using PLPDF and Jasper and all those reporting tools that we bolt on. Is there any progress or any hope of having BI Publisher Lite?
I think it's called Cocoon.
So question about reporting. I fought this battle when I was at Oracle and even past Oracle. BI Publisher, powerful tool, powerful price, right? Most people in Apex who want to do reporting are using like 1/50th of what BI Publisher can do, produce a PDF document that looks okay. I went all the way up the chain as high as I could go to Andy Mendelson and talk to him a couple times post-Oracle and pre-Oracle about a BI Publisher Lite tool, which is BI Publisher just licensed a little bit differently and support only of Apex applications. Hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Sure. Couple comments on reporting. First, we think it's absolutely top of the list in terms of things that we think our customers want. And so our challenge is how to deliver proper reporting. And so There's a number of different ways we can approach it. We think the BI Publisher tool is a real strong tool. The big, drawback is the price, and people might not know it, but if you have an enterprise agreement and you're a big company, you can probably get a pretty good discount on it. If you're a small company, don't have that much money, you probably can't get a discount on it, so it's like a double whammy. I didn't say that, but but just the same, assuming that you need a lower cost solution, we are enhancing the Apex listener to have enhanced reporting capabilities and simultaneously enhancing Apex. But don't look for anything earth-shattering in 4.2. Maybe a couple minor enhancements here or there, but for 5.0, at least it's on my current top list, which of course could change over the next year. And then simultaneously, we're looking to do reporting capabilities inside of SQL Developer as well. And so the new versions of SQL Developer, and you can talk to Chris, and he can demo it, or Jeff Smith, and they'd be happy to show them to you as well. So we're hoping to distinguish reporting into two different flavors. One is like a DBA report. Someone calls you up and says, hey, tell me, all those people whose name's Jose who live in Texas that are over 6 feet, and the DBA can write the report, send you your PDF, and that would be like a SQL Developer type of thing. And then the question of oh, I've got my Apex application, and I need to be able to print this and have it send a really beautiful PDF to our customers, and then that's the Apex listener enhancement and being able to do something there. But unfortunately, we do work hard. Trust me. But and Mark Ziefs will have additional detail on the 4.2 enhancements. But don't look for anything close to perfect until 5.0.
All right, anybody with another question? Or do I have to start making them up? All right.
Oh, troublemaker.
So bringing back the mobile topic, I'm assuming you guys have started building many cross-platform mobile applications, and looks like some of the sample applications are doing separate pages for jQuery Mobile and a regular page for this, and we also saw the direction about responsive design. Are there any other tips, thoughts based on mobile applications that you guys have rolled out, especially the cross-platform?
Wouldn't it be great to be able to say what template you'd like it to use based upon what the browser type is and that? I mean, I think that would be a great enhancement. Would be able to, for a mobile app, I want this template. For something else, that's a great option. Way back in, I don't know if it was in WebDB or Oracle Portal, you could do things like specify how many rows per page you wanted to show based upon whether or not it was being on a mobile app, those kinds of things. I mean, my real feeling is that you can do those exact kind of things in the current framework. You can actually, set some session state to say rows per page based upon, when they first come in, check and see what their browser is and do that. You can even make your templates. We did this. It was ridiculous, right? But we did this. We built some templates that would recognize what kind of browser you were in and have a different template based upon that. But it's not easy right now. And until the framework is expanded to have specifically the ability to identify it, it's gonna require work. At least that's my opinion. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always in the minority on this. I'm okay with a mobile app and a full app. Couple reasons why. One, maintainability. If there's an issue with one, there's an issue with one, not with two. Two, security. It's a lot easier to say, my HR people can access any record, anything in the whole company, but the employee HR portal app is going to be a completely different set of privileges. So I'm in a lot of cases, I'm okay with that, and I don't think the responsiveness stuff is cool, and I think that's going to be the way to go for certain types of apps. But just to segment them and say, I'm not going to type for more than about 10 seconds on this thing, and I think a lot of people sort of agree with that. It's mostly data consumption. That's very different than what you're going to use to key in records, right? So maybe I enter a couple text items, more select lists, more easy to touch controls versus the full-blown app. But I think that overall, over time, that manageability, being able to release separately, being able to patch one and not impact the other, is going to outweigh the esoteric achievement of, look, it changed, right? I mean, to me, in what I do and in the apps that I build, I don't see a lot of need for that. Now, there's definitely cases where that does come into play, and it does make some sense.
And just to add to what Scott said, I think there's a lot of pros and cons to the two different applications versus single application. And to be honest, internally, we still haven't resolved that. Sometimes we do two separate apps, sometimes we do a single app. But one thing about Apex that if you go the two apps route, the most common complaint about that is you need to duplicate functionality in both apps, and something changes, you end up having to change it in two places. But Application Express for a long time now, and I forget which version it first came in, has got the concept of publish subscribe for a lot of the key components. So even with two different applications, you can share lists of values, authentication schemes, authorization schemes, that kind of thing. So it's kind of isolating what is common between the desktop version and the mobile version, what is different. And I think that is really going to define whether you go for two different apps or a single combined app.
Even doing something simple like creating views, right? So I might want, a view that joins 5 tables together, a couple where clauses. Mobile app's going to be select column A, B, C. Desktop app is going to be select all columns, but it's the same view. So if something changes, there's a bug in the view definition, patching it in one place, and it does impact both. It takes a little thought, but I think 2 versus 1 has a lot of benefit in a lot of cases.
So hopefully we can do just a little role playing here. Let's say that I'm a prospective client and you guys are coming in and pitching me an application. And I say to you, this is great, everything looks good. Why shouldn't I use another environment such as SharePoint? And I don't mean to pick on Microsoft, but he started it, so we'll continue. So why should I use Apex in 30 seconds over another platform?
Actually, we have a customer who's using SharePoint quite a lot. SharePoint is good for like document management, like sharing content. It's built for that. Apex is built for developing your applications, and what we have done is we integrated both. So they use SharePoint, but in SharePoint they have a web part, and the web part is calling an Apex application. So they use the dashboards that are in SharePoint. They're basically Apex charts. There's Apex reports in there. So you can use best of both worlds, if you like. If I had to choose, I would build everything in Apex, but that's my personal opinion. I don't want to have the license of SharePoint and all that. If you have SharePoint, then yeah. Why not integrate both? The thing was that they tried to build applications in SharePoint, and it's really, really hard, and it's not very flexible. It's not built for that. They went a couple of months to build an application. They didn't get it done. They called us. We built something in 2 weeks, and they're like, there's no way to compare SharePoint with Apex in that respect.
Just to add on that note, at the end of the day, you have to look at what the business wants to support. And if you're walking into a team, and Joel touched on this, if you're walking in a team that uses SQL Server and is a C++ shop, it's not going to be the right technology. No matter how good it is, there's going to be culture change, you're going to fight with them, and what's the point? The developers know C++ and they know SQL Server. So it's finding the right marriage between the technology almost that go into shops with Oracle. Now that being said, there's also the pitch to organizations who just want the application to work in the sense that they've got this business requirement, they don't care how it's made, they just want it to work and secure. Absolutely pitch Apex, and it's a very simple tool to pitch because you can show them prototypes in the first even pitch. You can say, look, this is your business requirement, here's a prototype we did in a day, and you're probably already going to win the sale from that.
And it was very nice to have the opportunity to meet with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to pitch the product that we're selling. And I just want you to remember that Apex provides you the ability to build what's unique to your business. If every business needed the same application, they'd buy it and nobody would have a competitive advantage. But your business is unique and you have unique business rules, and you need to be able to implement those roll them out, test them, and have them be secure rapidly in a changing business environment. And Apex is going to be able to provide those capabilities to you.
Yeah. Sold. Yeah, and there's not too much more to say. You have to be pretty pragmatic about it. You know, like Martin said, if you're C++ and SQL Server and I try to pitch Apex, I usually don't waste my time. That's your direction. If I'm sensing you're willing to listen, we have customers that are .NET SQL Server shops that do run Apex. They don't care. They think they see the value of it. They see how fast it is. But at the end of the day, I think you can give them the information. You can show them what you can do. You can show them how fast it is to build things, how easy it is to maintain things. They're going to make the ultimate call. And a lot of times it goes Apex's way, but sometimes, you know, there's IT policies that they can't influence. That's also a little risky in some senses, where you go in as the renegade technology, and as Apex grows up, because it grows up real fast, everybody starts understanding it and wanting to use it. I've seen it get squashed from above, because now it's got the attention of IT, and they say, oh, what is that? That's not .NET. We need to move that over to .NET. And despite pleas and whatnot, I've seen a couple times where it actually has just been, you know, decommissioned, unfortunately. I've seen the other way too, where, ooh, what is that, right? Well, why do we have all this .NET stuff? Let's move everything in this direction. That happens a lot more often.
And I'll drop one other piece in, and that's the whole concept of being metadata driven. I love that. You know, Oracle Designer had the whole metadata driven thing. Apex has got that in spades. You look at ADF Head Start, the J Head Start, that's metadata driven. When I use ADF applications, I like J Head Start because it's metadata driven, and I think that gives you a huge technical advantage. I wouldn't give that to the CEO, though, that I just met with.
Got a question from the live stream. When will the winners of the Apex plugin contest be announced?
That is an excellent question. We announced them yesterday. Unfortunately, none of them were here. We appreciate everyone who participated in the competition. If you want to see the results of the plugins that were actually created, go to apexplugin.com, and there's a separate category for the ODTUG competition. You'll be seeing a post on ODTUG.com, the blog site. We'll post the winners and show you pictures of what they won.
I'm just wondering, does Apex fit into the whole concept of the addition-based redefinition? And otherwise, what are any suggestions for deploying a new version of a production Apex app in an environment that has zero tolerance for downtime, including, you know, supporting objects such as table structure changes, PL SQL packages, and things like that. So to deploy a new version of your production application to change all those things, plus the Apex app in an environment where you really can't tolerate downtime.
I'll take that one. We're probably going to get a tweet from Rel Hartman watching back in the Netherlands any moment. I think it was this time last year at ODTUG, he actually did a presentation on addition-based redefinition. The short answer is yes, Apex completely supports it. You can use it. There's some really interesting possibilities there using it. The only thing is, as far as I'm aware, nobody's actually doing that in production right now, unless anybody in the audience can contradict me on that. It's one of those features in the database. It's a super cool feature in the database, but at first pass, it's kind of a complex feature, and I think people are a little bit wary of it until it's a bit more documented, a bit proven. But Apex 4.1, Mike, actually added the option to specify which edition you wanted that application to run in. Me and Raul worked on a couple of proof of concepts on it, and you can have two different versions of your application running. And actually, it can be extended to have two different versions of your application running in two different versions of Apex in the same instance as well. But there's a few quirks with that. So.
That's it. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. Someone in the back. Good job, waiting for Doug to walk away.
I have a requirement that for a single page in Apex, my clients would like to have page A open, so the page open with person A in it, and then in the same browser, in a different tab, have the same page with person B open in it. I'm just new to Apex, only been working with it for a year, but I ran into problems with sessions, and I realized that I had to have all the sessions, all the information going out to the web browser, and then back again. I couldn't have do not save state in any of those things. Otherwise, I'd get errors because the session A would override B. Is there going to be any support for that sort of multiple page things in the future? Do you understand the question?
Yeah.
Yes. Stored in the database, your session has one piece of session state for each item, right? And I think the answer is the support is to do exactly what you said. Make sure that everything that you need about that page comes with that page. And the support really is, let's take, for example, if you have a report on that page. And so you've got two tabs open, and the one is, I don't know, a person and all their phone numbers. And the other tab is a different person and all their phone numbers. And when you click next, you want it to be the right person's phone number, right, on each tab. And so you need to, for example, in an interactive report, you need to make sure that you submit in with when you hit the go button, the stuff that you need. And as far as I know, that's the level of support that you're going to get on that.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I've looked at it before, it's not necessarily an Apex-specific problem. It's more a way that Apex handles internal sessions combined with how browsers actually operate as well. We did have a customer who kind of wanted a very similar scenario. They wanted to pop up a window and actually simulate being a different user, and then obviously the sessions collided and so on. This was back in the IE6 days. Remember those days?
Yesterday?
Tomorrow for a lot of people.
Yeah, today.
And with IE6, there's actually a parameter you can specify, I forget what it is, to tell IE to launch a new process rather than sharing the same process at the operating system level. That means that Internet Explorer will use a separate cookie behind the scenes. That's something that had to be hard-coded. Users had to click a separate link on their desktop. Very, very tedious. So there's no good solution as far as I'm aware. There's nothing on the horizon to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that we've done is have two machine names, in your DNS entry. And you launch one and you go to, my website 1, and you get your whole session state. And the other one is my website 2, and you get your whole session state there. But that's not what you're talking about. You're on a right-click, open it in a new tab, right-click, open it in a new tab. You don't want to go through that hassle. Right.
I guess my big concern of security is that we're exposing stuff to the browser that we don't necessarily want to be tampered with. So the thing you want a session state to stay the same, but we're exposing it to the browser where it could be changed. And that's kind of a little bit annoying.
Hidden and protected is the only way you can,
Yeah, to protect it.
I have read a couple of articles regarding Apex installation, and I haven't been able to get a straight answer. Where should Apex be installed? By default, it's installed on the Kscope table space. I have heard some of them that they prefer to create a single table space for Apex. And I would like to know, for instance, from the panel, how do you do it? And from Oracle, is there any specific reason to have it on the Kscope table space?
This has been a bit of a long-term bugbear of mine, that in the Apex documentation, the example shows using the Kscope table space. In most of our production environments, we tend to set Apex up in its own table space. There's really one good reason for that, and that is in Enterprise Manager and those types of tools, if the DBA sees that Kscope table space is hot, it's getting a lot of activity, quite often the knee-jerk reaction is, it must be Apex. The Kscope table space has a lot of other stuff going on in there. That's why we prefer to have it in its own table space, so it's way down, hopefully, way down lower in the list of those hot table spaces. There's also other reasons, like if you want to migrate Apex to another environment, you can use transportable table spaces, and you're not carrying across a lot of stuff from Stats Pack and things like that, which are installed by default. So I would love to see that changed in the Apex documentation. It's been in there since the first versions. Don't really hold out any hope of that happening, but the guys are in the room who would make that happen if it's going to happen.
And also use different table spaces for your files and Apex and the engine itself.
Yeah, we've just seen that you might want to put it on faster disks because it's a high availability application. Let's say you might want it on faster disk space. So it's almost like segregating your business units. And if you do segregate your business units, segregate your table space accordingly.
It's also easier to do kind of forward predictions about sizing of your applications if you're not, sharing a table space with a bunch of other non-Apex related applications. So I can't think of a single reason to install it into Sysaux other than it's kind of faster because it's already there. But I can think of a bunch of reasons to use a different table space.
I always used to like used to be able to separate out the indexes into a separate table space. I liked that. ASM, from a performance standpoint, maybe you don't need to do that anymore, but you didn't have to back up that table space, these guys, Joel's standing, we should just keep talking and see how long we make him stand.
Yeah, I completely agree with what the panel said, and actually there's no compelling reason to put it in Sysaux. I know out of the box with the database, you run DBCA, we have to put it in some data, some table space that exists, but on apex.oracle.com, we always put the next Apex version in its own separate table space, and it makes it easy when we upgrade because then we go to Apex 5.0, we drop the user, the data file, the table space, everything. And so there's no compelling reason, I agree, there's no compelling reason to put it in Sysaux, and we will change the documentation. I took a note. Thanks.
What other panel changes features before they come out, right? All right, we've got about a minute left. I think it's time to conclude. First of all, I want to thank the panel for participating. Is there another question?
There was one.
No, you can have your question. Because you're over there. If you're over here, I'd say no.
With the introduction of Oracle pushing a lot for the Oracle Cloud, how do you see this impacting the Apex development environment as a whole and as the community?
The cloud question.
Where's Greenwald?
I love it in the sense that, for a number of reasons, I think it demonstrates Oracle's commitment to Apex in a big way. I think it has driven a lot of enhancements to Apex that they'll benefit everybody in security and performance and a whole bunch of other things. I know that everybody on the Apex team got a huge bonus when they announced all that. Maybe that was a rumor. I don't know. But I also think it gives an opportunity for better sharing of packaged applications and those kinds of things. When Oracle Portal came out, I would have loved to have Oracle Portal be a hosted environment that was very low cost. Heck, it could have been free with ads, right? But that never happened. I think it's a good opportunity for Apex to have that kind of impact. I think the pricing makes a big difference on that, as well as the sort of the uptake of people in the room. But I like it from all those reasons.
I also think that it's a great opportunity for all the developers because of the packaged applications in there. So if you create your own applications you want to distribute, there's no platform available, and Oracle supports that platform. Next to that, for us personally, like we host applications for customers as well. Our infrastructure is on Amazon, but people can call me now in the middle of the night, then they will call Oracle in the middle of the night. So I would go with the cloud. If it will support everything that I need, I will go with the cloud as well. Maybe not for like the development things, but like for production is really nice. I think it's a huge opportunity for all of you and all the people that are not using Apex yet, but they will see that like the community will expand tremendously, I think.
And just to add one feature, sometimes what happens is in a development shop, unfortunately, the DBAs and developers don't always get along, and it becomes difficult for developers to get that workspace. Let's say you're working on an R&D shop, and you're already laughing. I mean, a lot of us have encountered that where you want to develop something almost as an R&D project, but you just can't get that space, the server set up. Now maybe you have access to install Oracle XE, something small, but that might not work, where now you can go into the cloud, develop it as an R&D project without having to go through the system, like your internal system processes, and then once you have it working, bringing it back in, if you host it internally, and then pushing it across, because you've already made that initial step, and so it starts breaking down that barrier sometimes for developers that they don't like the red tape. They can go somewhere else and then bring it back in.
Yeah, and I think I won't be able to answer the cloud question in any length of time, but what we're doing very similar things to that. We just spin up an AWS instance. We've got a 4.0 dev, a 4.1 dev, a 4.1 cloud dev, a training. Whenever we need one, it's just a couple clicks away. Are we ready to start doing production stuff there? Almost, for some things, and I think that's really everybody's big hesitation. It's really good that Apex is there. I think it brings tons of credibility. If the community is going to expand, it's going to benefit from it. I think it's a whole nother discussion with the whole, my data is controlled by me, I know who's managing it, when people are going to be comfortable enough to throw that over the fence, and I can't answer that question today. I think we're just going to have to wait to see how that all works out.
Yeah, but I think also from a cost perspective, the Oracle Cloud is running on Exadata. There are not that many people in the room. I think at least I'm not able to buy that machine myself. So just the hardware that's underneath that, all the doing 24/7 support it's hard, and keeping all your servers alive, having multiple having everything double. They will take care of everything. Like the setup that they have, there's no other hosting company at this moment that provides that. So it's
I agree completely. It's there's no way to see it as a bad thing, I think. But one thing for me, Anton mentioned credibility and kind of stamp of approval. And if I think back to how long we've been working with Apex, one question that we keep getting asked by companies is this tool still going to be around in a couple of years' time? Why should I choose Apex? Anybody who uses the OTN forums, that question comes up every once in a while. It was asked in 2004, 2006, and you only know historically whether that tool is still around now. It's only when you kind of look backwards. But for the first time with the Oracle Cloud, I think Oracle have made a huge investment in terms of time, money, effort, all of that kind of thing, to now say, hey, we're willing to do this. This is a stamp of approval that we're serious about this tool. We all knew it was a serious tool and they were serious about it, but now publicly Oracle is saying, we're willing to take your money for this tool. So, to support this tool, sorry, let me rephrase that, to host your application. So yeah, to me as an Apex consultant, it's a stamp of approval that, my job's safe for the next couple of years because Oracle are going to continue to develop Apex. So thank you.
Great. All right. I'd like to first thank the panel for participating in the Lunch and Learn today. And then again, we couldn't do all this stuff without the folks from Oracle here. Their support of this conference year over year is just phenomenal. Like I said, go ask your friends who are in the different forums how many features got implemented. All right, thanks everybody. Enjoy the conference.
Good job, guys.
Very good.